В Евразии архитектура рамы и неделимой безопасности.
And that's a big bilateral meet beginning between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Tianjin in China. This is that photo op moment that we had been waiting for. Both Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi starting with their opening remarks there before the bilateral meeting. A very significant, important meeting coming at a time when the US has tried to double down on India with their tariffs. But you can see clearly with the opening statements by the two big leaders that the friendship is intact, their strategic ties will remain intact, and these are two partners, traditional allies who go back decades. You're watching Breaking Ground with me, Vedika. This is our top story all day today. The SCO meet, the bilaterals that are happening, and the significance and symbolism of it all. But before we go ahead and introduce our guest and reporter, let's just go through what message both Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are trying to send out, not only to their countries, but to the world. Firstly, of course, this comes at a time when the US tariffs have hit India 2 times over. It's 50% now, as you know. They're showing the warmth despite what is happening around them. Along with that, the bonhomie, of course, disregards what US Donald Trump has been saying along with his team, be it Navarro, be it the others. We're going to put out some graphics for you now to also tell you what this really means for India and for Putin. This also shows that this relationship really is bulletproof between the two countries. India has displayed that it made the right call, putting its trust in Russia. Remember, US remains unpredictable at this point in time, given all that has been happening, all the rhetoric that has been coming from the two nations. And while the US tried to meddle with Indo-Russia ties, the display of unity is for all to see, especially the US President Donald Trump. Aditya now joins me live from Tianjin. He's been following all the details, updates he's been sending us from there. Also, we will be joined live by Dr. Andreas Umlund, analyst, Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies in the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Aditya, this is one moment. It was all building up to unexpected moment, really, Aditya, when we saw the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as the Russian President in that car, the ride really to the venue, and now the opening statements have happened. What's on the agenda? They've made it clear that they're traditional allies. They have very close ties, but come down to business now. What are we expecting in the next 40-45 minutes between the two leaders and their teams?
Well, Vedika, quite incredible visuals, isn't it? Nobody had expected Putin and Modi to ride in the same vehicle because there was paucity of time. And that's why Putin suggested that Modi accompany him in his own car to the bilateral hotel. And that's where the bilateral has just begun. We heard the opening remarks by both Prime Minister Narendra Modi and, of course, the Russian President Putin. This comes at a time when 36 hours ago, Zelensky made a phone call to Modi asking him to convince Putin to come on the dialogue table for a ceasefire for long-lasting peace. Remember, over the last 6 months, there has been a lot of speculation. Donald Trump, in fact, the US president, came on this plank that he will restore peace between Russia and Ukraine. It's been 3.5 years, but there's no sign of peace. There have been several rounds of negotiations that have taken place with Steve Witkoff also traveling all across to Moscow and Kyiv. But US foreign policy clearly not able to achieve that peace. And that's why both Ukraine and Russia are now looking towards Prime Minister Modi and India for that balancing factor, neutrality clearly playing a significant role here. And apart from the Ukraine crisis, this also comes at a time when US tariffs have been slapped against India, 50% tariffs already. And that too, India being a strategic ally of US doesn't really sound that great. And of course, at the same time, the kind of rhetoric that's coming in from the US side, very, fierce barbs at New Delhi, at Prime Minister Modi, attacks by attack dogs like Navarro, who are, bringing in Indian caste and Brahmins, etc. That clearly is to provoke Indians. That clearly is to provoke Indian government. But India has stood its stance. India is saying that if it will continue to trade with Russia, the trade will not end. And at the same time, Vedika, the defense cooperation will be taken to another level. The trade will continue. Russian oil will continue to come to New Delhi. And there's no stopping on that. India will continue to pursue its national interests.
Aditya, I'm going to keep you here for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, so don't go anywhere. Before I come back to you, I'm going to go to our guest this afternoon. Dr. Andreas Umland is with us. Dr. Umland, I want to understand from you, was the SCO meet as significant as these images that you're seeing at a time when US has doubled down on India with their tariff announcement? What you see on your screens are two leaders from two countries, two largest countries, of course, China also being the third, in that car, going on that ride, getting into the venue, promising that they will be strategic partners, promising close ties between them. Is the US watching closely?
Well, what first comes to my mind is the even more friendly meeting that Putin recently had with Donald Trump in Alaska. They were also driving in the presidential limousine, and there were lots of signs of friendship, and Trump has a close relationship with Putin from his first presidency, and they are talking all the time on telephone. So this juxtaposition here between the US and Russia doesn't make really sense for me, because in the last half year, the US has done a lot of pro-Russian moves. It has voted with Russia together in the United Nations. It has stopped military aid. It's still selling weapons to Ukraine, but it's not delivering military aid anymore. And it's taken often a pro-Russian position in this war. And so this is all a bit surprising to me. One also has to keep in mind that Ukraine is a former colony of Russia, and Russia's war is a neo-colonial and neo-imperial war against Ukraine. And against this background, this friendly relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin looks a bit odd from my perspective, at least, or from a Ukrainian perspective, I'm sure as well.
But Dr. Umland, is there also not a dichotomy there? Like you mentioned, you had the US president meeting with Putin, but what has happened with India in terms of tariffs, wouldn't that just organically just push India closer in terms of at least, you know, the symbolicness of it all towards Russia, especially at a SCO summit? It's not that the SCO summit was announced after the tariffs. We knew the SCO summit was coming up, but these images coming from there, even more powerful than it would be had US President Trump not announced the tariffs.
Well, the tariffs are global. And for instance, the European Union also is now suffering from tariffs, but that does not mean that the European Union is moving closer to Russia. On the contrary, there is now the conflict between Europe and Russia is increasing because of the war, because of child deportations, because of mass torture of prisoners of war, because of bombardments of apartment buildings, of hospitals, of universities, of schools in Ukraine. This sort of plus minus back and forth doesn't make sense to me. Yes, Trump has a very bizarre foreign economic policy.
Yes.
But why does that mean that one has to de facto support a neo-imperial, neo-colonial war with lots of signs of genocide against Ukraine? I mean,
but Dr. Umland, let me just interrupt there, because Russia's been a traditional ally to India. It's been there when the US has not. When US let India down, Russia stood by it. And that is a tie between the two countries that has remained. I'm going to come back to you in a moment from now. Going back to Aditya. Aditya, I want to understand even the atmospherics around you right now. How is the international media looking at this? You have, of course, people from all across the world, journalists where you are. But what's been the buzz? What's been the conversation around this one meeting that we're seeing on our screens?
Well, when we landed here, Vedika, the entire mood was around the SCO summit. The mood was around what will SCO summit really achieve. There were streets that were empty because obviously people were not there. There were VIP moments that were taking place. But currently, you know, if you go through the Chinese newspapers today, the front page is the family photo of the SCO. But the anchor of that front page is about Prime Minister Modi meeting Xi Jinping. So the reset of the ties, or at least the beginning of the reset of the ties between India and China, is predominantly, big in the Chinese media, in the international media also. I've had conversations with American journalists and French journalists who are also keeping a very close watch on the Modi-Putin bilateral because of the Ukraine angle and the Trump tariff angle. So there will be monitoring that very closely as well. We are here at the SCO venue. This is the International Media Center. Just meters away from here is the hotel where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin. Very important conversations on trade, on bilateral ties, and on the Ukraine crisis as well. You heard the Prime Minister there. That Prime Minister has said that this is not an era of war. Solutions cannot be found in the battlefield. And this is the time that there needs to be peace restored in Ukraine, and the end of the war needs to be achieved. So very important statements by the Prime Minister. Let's also remember that Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, is all set to visit India later this year as well for the annual meeting that really takes place. That is going to be a big diplomatic huddle in New Delhi. Apart from that, I'm pretty sure that the White House would be monitoring the developments very closely. And if not Trump on Truth Social, we would certainly hear Navarro speak about the Modi-Putin meeting, because this is not that they really have wanted all this while.
We're going to talk about Navarro at the top of 1 p.m. as well, Aditya. I'll pull you in then as well. But a huge diplomatic win for India as well. We'll come to that when it comes to the declaration. But another striking image, Aditya, from Tianjin, where you are, where you're witnessing all of this unravel, is the Chinese president, the Russian president, and the Indian Prime Minister in a huddle together. Like I said, it's not that the announcement of the SCO summit came after the announcement of the tariffs by Donald Trump. But if it's not the SCO summit per se, Aditya, that they will be looking at from the White House, these images should unsettle them to a certain extent.
You know, Trump's tariffs have really speeded up the entire process of diplomatic ties between India and China. We certainly need to thank Trump for that. But at the same time, the Troika, India, Russia, and China coming together, unprecedented. You know, there hasn't been a formal meeting, certainly, but who knows? In the coming days, in the weeks, this could be a reality, because this is a message from the platform of the SCO on the sidelines that we clearly see that at the very beginning of the SCO plenary, even before the family photo is taken, Modi, Xi Jinping, and Putin come together. They have a friendly banter. It's a message to Trump that these nations stand together. They are economic powerhouses. They are resilient powers. They have a great population, which clearly knows how democracy functions, knows how economy functions, and are all for free connectivity and for security cooperation. But American policy has shifted over the last few months. There have been drastic tariffs that have been imposed, especially on India, 50% tariffs and then penalty as well, and very racist and obnoxious comments coming in from the White House as well. But this image of Trump, of Modi, Xi Jinping, and of course Putin coming together is unprecedented. On the other hand, the SCO declaration spoke against terrorism. We also saw Shehbaz Sharif standing alone there, his hands tied, looking helplessly as to what to do diplomatically. But he doesn't have any friends out there. Even though he's in a friendly country, he calls China an iron brother. At the same time, Vedika, Shehbaz Sharif was isolated. At a time when he was standing alone, Putin and Modi, hand in hand, smiling, walked past, clearly indicating who really is calling the shots here at the SCO. So a big message here from the SCO to the Western parts.
Stay with me, Dr. Amlan and Aditya. Another point, Aditya, which I will come to in a while, but I want to make right now, is also that huge show of strength by Xi Jinping in a day or two, where the Pakistani Prime Minister has also been invited. We'll talk about that in a moment from now, because, of course, while India and China are on the talking table, there are, of course, other diplomatic maneuvers happening with the Chinese president and the Pakistani Prime Minister. But the big takeaway also from this SCO summit is a huge diplomatic win for India at this summit, shortly after Prime Minister Narendra Modi stressed that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization member states must say in one voice the double standards on terrorism are unacceptable. The regional bloc mentioned that the Pahalgam terror attack and they condemned the terror attack, echoing India's stand in the summit declaration. Now, diplomatically, this, like I said, is a massive win for India, especially because Pakistan, which has long backed terror on Indian soil, is a member of the bloc. And its Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, like Aditya just mentioned, is attending this summit. Now, the member states strongly condemned the terrorist attack in Pahalgam, which left 26 innocents dead, and expressed their quote-unquote deepest sympathy and condolences to the families of the dead and wounded. The members further said perpetrators, organizers, and sponsors of such attacks must be brought to justice. The member states also stressed that attempts to use terrorists, separatists and extremist groups for mercenary purposes is not acceptable. Let's listen in to the statements made by the Indian Prime Minister ahead of that declaration.
अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं। आतंकवाद सिर्फ किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता। इसलिए आतंकवाद से लड़ाई में भारत ने एकजुटता पर बल दिया। इसमें एससीओ रेट्स की बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही। इस वर्ष भारत ने जॉइंट इंफॉर्मेशन ऑपरेशन को लीड करते हुए अल कायदा और इससे जुड़े आतंकी संगठनों से लड़ने का इनिशिएटिव किया। हमने रेडिकलाइजेशन के विरुद्ध समन्वय बढ़ाने और मिलकर कदम उठाने का भी प्रस्ताव रखा। टेरर फाइनेंसिंग के खिलाफ आवाज उठाई। इसमें मेरे समर्थन के लिए मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, भारत पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हो गए। हाल ही में हमने पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। यह हमला केवल भारत की अंतरात्मा पर ही आघात नहीं, यह मानवता में विश्वास रखने वाले हर देश, हर व्यक्ति को खुली चुनौती थी। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है? एक्सेलेंसी, हमें स्पष्ट रूप से और एक स्वर में कहना होगा कि आतंकवाद पर कोई भी डबल स्टैंडर्ड स्वीकार्य नहीं होंगे। हमें मिलकर आतंकवाद का हर रंग में, हर रूप में विरोध करना होगा। ये मानवता के प्रति हमारा दायित्व है।
All right, a quick recap before we go back to our guest and Aditya, who's on the ground. Why is this a big win for India? Because SCO members condemned the Pahalgam attack that saw civilians being brutally killed. Let's move to the next page of this. SCO reaffirms commitment against terrorism. This at a time when you had the Pakistani Prime Minister in that room on that table. Also, SCO member states have said use of terrorism by nations is unacceptable. That, of course, is also a controversial point, which I'll get to in a moment from now. SCO calls out double standards in fight against terror as well. Can we go to the next page of this as well? International community must combat terror. Big points coming out in terms of that declaration. Must fight cross-border terror movements as well is another part of that statement. Aditya and Dr. Amlin still with me. Aditya, I'm going to come to you first. This is a big diplomatic win for India, especially because Pakistan, which has long backed terror on Indian soil, is a member of the bloc and its Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is in attendance.
Well, honestly, Vedika, nobody had expected this to happen in such a fashion. Everybody knew that terrorism would be condemned as a matter of policy from the SCO. But to mention Pahalgam, to mention the attack that took place in April this year, where 26 innocent tourists were killed by Pakistani terrorists of Lashkar-e-Toiba and TRF. And everybody knows, it's a common knowledge that Pakistan Army Chief Asim Munir and Pakistan Army were the conspirators of this terror attack. India has exposed and shamed them globally, and that led to Operation Sindoor as well, where China came to the aid of Pakistan with equipment, with latest technology, with intelligence. But even though that happened, China did not object to the mention of Pahalgam this time around. You would remember, Vedika, also that a couple of weeks ago, India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh was in China, and at that particular time, there was no consensus. Pahalgam was not part of the main text of the declaration. But now, within 2 weeks, a game-changer statement, Indian diplomats prevailing over the final joint declaration here at the Tianjin final declaration, and terrorism is being condemned. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also very vociferously spoke against terrorism in presence of the Pakistani Prime Minister, saying that terrorism cannot be tolerated. Every country needs to stand together. So China also bringing in a paradigm shift in their policy. Earlier, they used to aid and abet Pakistan in a great way. This time around, at least on the position of terrorism, they have stood with India.
Dr. Amlan, coming to you now, how do you see this really, everything that's unraveling and playing out at Tianjin right now? On one hand, you have this declaration we're talking about condemning terror and cross-border terrorism. But like I referred to earlier, you also have Xi Jinping inviting the Pakistani Prime Minister to that huge show of strength that's going to happen in a few days from now.
I don't know about the Pakistani and Chinese relations, but from a Ukrainian point of view, this declaration against terror looks almost like a joke, because what Ukraine is experiencing every day is a large-scale terror against its civilian population with Russian drones, Russian cruise missiles, Russian rockets. As I mentioned already, civilian buildings, including hospitals, kindergartens, and so on, being targeted. Recently, the EU delegation was targeted. The Azerbaijani embassy in Kiev was targeted. So terror is in Ukraine an everyday reality from Russia's side, and that Russia is now signing these sort of declarations really sounds like a big joke.
All right, do stay with me. Aditya, coming back to you from now. After this bilateral meeting, what are we expecting next? We do know that the Prime Minister will be departing for India soon. But in terms of optics, there have been enough really since the beginning of the day. Today, we've been busy reporting on all of it. A lot of symbolism, a lot of significance. Take us through it all.
Well, it is much delayed because the plenary meeting continued for a while. And then the bilateral between Putin and Modi also is continuing. It's expected that it will take place at least for an hour. We only have had only first 30 minutes of that particular meeting. So Prime Minister had to enplane for New Delhi at around 1:40 p.m. local time. We were already close to 2 hours delayed post that. So we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold. But what I can tell you is that post the Modi-Putin bilateral, we'll have a statement from the Russian side, which will be mostly a text statement, but we'll also have a statement from the Indian Foreign Secretary, Vikram Misri, who will be releasing a video. Instead of a press conference, because of the paucity of time, there might be a video that Vikram Misri might be releasing to give details both of the plenary session that happened, Prime Minister's robust comments, not just against terrorism, but also strengthening the SCO, which he defined as security, connectivity, and opportunity. And that's what the SCO needs to work on. That was India's mantra at the SCO. So we're waiting for the bilateral to end to know more details on the Ukraine crisis, talks between Modi and Putin on Ukraine, and of course on Donald Trump's theatrics and threats against India in the recent days.
And Aditya, this comes at a time when just yesterday Zelensky had a talk, or I might get the timeline wrong, but they had a talk also, Indian Prime Minister and Zelensky, over Russia, over Ukraine, and then you have this bilateral meeting. So of course, we have Ukraine also watching this bilat very closely. It comes at a time when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in no uncertain terms, has said, we'll do all that we can for peace in that region.
I think India is the only country since the last 3.5 years, Vedika, which has maintained that this is not an era of war and solutions cannot be found in the battlefield. That's been the mantra even of the G20 that happened in 2023 as Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi, where a historic consensus was achieved on Russia-Ukraine. But a lot of water has flown down the river since. There's been a lot of violence. There's been a lot of aggression. So we'll have to wait and watch when and how that peace agreement and settlement really is. But India has maintained steadfast and good relations both with Russia and Ukraine. We have historical ties with Russia. Putin and Modi have a kind of a bonhomie. And now Zelensky also reaching out to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So we'll have to wait and watch what kind of a message will Prime Minister Modi give to Putin. In the initial remarks, he did say that he expects peace in Ukraine. He expects the war to be over. But there is much more technicality that is involved here as well. This also exposes in many ways, Vedika, the failure of the Trump administration's policy on bringing peace in Ukraine. They had the Alaska summit in the last 6 months. There have been a lot of commitments made on the peace, but not much has been achieved so far. There could be a possibility of Zelensky and Putin meeting, or perhaps Trump, Zelensky, and Putin meeting. As of now, the Russian side is rejecting all those speculations. So clearly, a lot yet to happen, but incredible that Zelensky has reached out to Modi with an SOS call to convince Putin to come on the dialogue table for peace. And now Putin has also expressed that Modi has played an incredible role. He has been keeping Modi abreast with the latest on the peace process. And we perhaps could see a situation where there could be a paradigm shift in this war situation, and we would be walking towards a path of peace. We are waiting for that bilateral to end, and perhaps after that we'll get the latest and, of course, the Foreign Secretary's version of the way things unfolded all day today.
Let's now talk about the three leaders in that one frame, Russia, China and India, the world's three largest countries and their leaders in that one frame together at the SCO meet. We're going to put out visuals of that in a moment from now of the Troika. And this comes at a time when India has shown that even though there are US tariffs that are doubling down on them, they will continue to be in those huddles. Well, of course, there are a lot of issues geopolitically among the three countries. There's proximity between Russia and China that also puts a question on what role India plays at the SCO meet when it comes to Russia and China. But those visuals also a headline everywhere today, a visual and a video that everyone, especially the US, will be watching closely. Aditya, coming back to you, we cannot deny the fact, when you even look at these visuals really, that China is close to Pakistan as well. It has so much of funding in Pakistan. That's one factor that we cannot look away from, even when you look at these visuals of, what we are just kind of quoting as the erstwhile RIC.
Well, that's right. Those visuals have really created international headlines. At the very beginning of the SCO summit, even before the plenary, even before the family photo was taken, just when the leaders went inside, all leaders were huddled across. Three leaders stood out, Putin, Modi, and of course Xi Jinping. All three huddled together, having a friendly banter, talking to each other, smiling faces. And then thereafter, after the family photo, translators and interpreters also came in. So 6 people standing there, 3 global leaders, a powerful image, a strong message to White House and the Western nation that you cannot bully us. You cannot tell us how democracy functions. You cannot tell us how the way the new international order will be. We will be the ones to create that order, and we know how to stand for our own people and create our own independent national foreign policy. So clearly, a very interesting images, a lot of vibrance in that image also. Also the image of Modi and Putin embracing each other. Speaking about the long-lasting friendship, really very, very interesting imagery coming in from the SCO Vedika. And in that bilateral also, Putin was smiling when Modi said that we are waiting for you. The entire population of India is waiting for you to come to the country very soon for that bilateral meeting. So, yes,
all right.
Of course, it is a very interesting newsy day here in China, and perhaps more headlines awaited in the next couple of hours.
Aditya, do stay with me. Dr. Amlan's been waiting very patiently. Dr. Amlan, before I let you go, the key takeaways really that you would, summarize this into in terms of the bilateral meeting between Russian leader and the Indian Prime Minister, and the key takeaways from the SCO from your perspective.
Frankly, I find it sad because what is happening currently with Russia is that Russia is trying to destroy the post-1945 order by destroying a full member of the United Nations, an official non-nuclear weapon state. It's conducting genocide in Ukraine, and it's conducting a neo-imperial, neo-colonial war. And for some reason, that is all unimportant for India. And Ukrainians are nowadays as unhappy about the White House and about Trump as Indians are, because the US is behaving very bizarrely vis-a-vis Russia. And from a Ukrainian point of view, I live in Kiev. This all looks strange, to be frank.
Right, thank you for joining us, Dr. Amlan. I'm now going to take our viewers through some of the most defining images from the SCO summit today. These are the images really that have gone viral on social media as well. Of course, the fifth one here being tiger and bear in the beast. This is, of course, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President together just ahead of the bilateral meeting between the two. That image going viral on social media, of course, at this point. Modi, Putin, Xi in a huddle, strategic regrouping. You can see the three leaders from the three largest countries in the world there sharing a light moment, talking together. That huddle really with Narendra Modi having a little laugh there with them going viral as well, because this is the RIC that everyone was talking about, erstwhile RIC, and the question really is, with the tariffs that have doubled down on India, are we going to see some kind of realignment between those countries? And that hug between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, light moments being shared there, captured on camera between the two leaders. That's another defining image where you see the Russian President and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking and talking at the venue of the summit. But there you have Shehbaz Sharif, who is standing by the side, and no, of course, interaction happening with him in that moment. And that handshake again between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Russian President, once again showing and signaling the deep ties between the two countries, and that message going out to the US that those ties will remain and will remain strong despite all the rhetoric that is coming India's way from the White House.